Okay, 14. Here we go. Matthew chapter 14, verse 1. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the report about Jesus and said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead, and therefore these powers are at work in him." For Herod had laid hold of John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had said to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And although he wanted to put him to death, he feared the multitude because they counted him as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday was celebrated, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod. Therefore he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. Okay, stop right here real quick. Bad idea. Okay, very bad idea. All right, moving on. 8. So she, having been prompted by her mother, said, "Give me John the Baptist's head here on a platter." Yeah, can you believe that? Okay, I'll read this and then. Okay. And the king was sorry, nevertheless, because of the oaths and because of those who sat with him, he commanded it to be given to her. So he sent and had John beheaded in prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl. And she brought it to her mother. I mean, how gross can it get, right? Then his disciples came and took away the body and buried it and went and told Jesus. Okay, so just to recap here. Okay, so this was another Herod. They had a lot of Herods, and I can't keep track of them all myself. But okay, so Herod was this tetrarch, okay? And so he had a brother named Philip. And Philip had a wife named Herodias. Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, So, okay, so it's his sister-in-law. Okay, all right, because now he was having relations with his sister-in-law, and John the Baptist was saying you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, it's against the law, of course. It's immoral, all that stuff. Because John had said to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Okay, and although he wanted to put him to death, he feared the multitude because they counted him as a prophet. So John, he wanted to put him to death over that, but didn't because fear of the people. Okay, but when Herod's birthday was celebrated, the daughter of Herodias, okay, so he was sleeping with the sister-in-law here, and she had a daughter. So I don't know if it was Philip's through Philip or whatever, but she had a daughter. The daughter danced before him and pleased Herod. So it was obviously a provocative dance, right? Therefore, he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. See, this is the problem with that stuff. Yeah, not a good idea here. Don't, he doesn't know what she's going to ask for, and he makes this just wide blank check promise with an oath to give her whatever she asks for. I mean, how foolish. Okay, so, and then the mother, Herodias, prompts this dancing daughter to do this, and it's because John the Baptist was calling out their sin, and Herodias didn't like it, and Herod not either. So she asked for this, and he grants this wish. And he's sorry, but he does it anyway because everybody is around and expecting him to deliver. So, the crowd was calling to him, and he didn't want to, he felt the pressure of that, so he went ahead with it. Okay, and then the disciples told Jesus what happened. So John the Baptist was martyred, and that's where this happens. And that's how it comes about. Okay, so now, and then there's more with this, it comes up later, but for now, we're here on 13. When Jesus heard it, oh, here we are, okay. I just saw this, feeding the 5,000. Okay, when Jesus heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the multitudes heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. So he obviously went there to mourn and be alone. But the multitudes heard it and came after him, all right? And when Jesus went out, he saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them and healed their sick. Okay, and you see that sentence a lot, and I really love that. All right, 15. When it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is already late. Send the multitudes away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves food." But Jesus said to them, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish." Okay, so I'm going to take a break here and say, he had already fed the other group. I think that already happened, but okay. That would be funny if it is. Okay, if I think this is the second time. Well, we'll see. I read so many things, I lose track, but okay. 18, he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, but it could have been in John. That's where it was. Okay, see, it was in there somewhere. And looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitudes. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. Now, those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So it was probably more like, 10,000 or more then. Well, all right, so this was a large group, and this was the first one, 5,000, and then the next one is 4,000, and that's what I was thinking of. It gets interesting. But okay, the same thing, I talked about it in John, a miracle here, feeding, it was provision, a miracle of provision. So that many people were fed out of 5 loaves and 2 fish. Okay. So now after he took the food, he looked up to heaven. Looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples. In John, it says he thanked God for them, and blessed them, all that. And that's important. All right. And the disciples gave to the multitudes, and then they all ate. So there was leftover. And look how much was left over. 12 baskets full of the leftovers. Okay. More than they started with. Isn't that interesting? And after feeding 10,000 people or so. Yeah, so, okay. Now, I went into more detail in the one in John, so I wouldn't go into that again. 22. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now, in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. Okay, so before I go on, I just want to mention, Jesus was walking on the water, which is a miracle, of course. And then Peter wanted to come and join him in this, right? And everything was working out fine. He was walking on the water, heading to Jesus, right? But what happened? It says, but when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. All right, and that's when he started sinking. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And I have heard a lot of people saying that this is a good explanation for, like, let's say we're Christians, but maybe we want to be where Jesus is and do what he's doing, and in a ministry or some way like that. And it seems like it's not going to be possible, but he says, yes, come out, and then maybe that's happening. But then they take their eyes off of Jesus and they start to notice the problems in their life, the troubles in the world, and they pay attention, they focus on that instead, right? And that's when they start to panic and get anxiety attacks and pangs of fear, and that's when they start sinking, okay, and they need to be rescued. So the moral of that story is, don't take your eyes off of him. Don't focus on the troubles and the problems in life and in the world. Just keep focused on Jesus and keep doing it and keep going. And he's going to sort it all out. He's going to calm the sea and the winds and the waves and all those things, the storms of life and everything. So that's the lesson there, okay? All right. Now, and immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God. Yeah. All right, 34. When they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent out into all that surrounding region, brought to him all who were sick, and begged him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched it were made perfectly well. So more miracles. Okay. All right. I'll roll on into 15 here. Okay. So then the scribes and Pharisees who were from Jerusalem came to Jesus, saying, Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. Okay, so here we get another hornet's nest of issues. So, of course it's good to wash your hands before you eat. That's a separate thing, but they're getting into this whole tradition of men thing, like it's a religious thing. And, I don't even remember what was in the Old Testament, but he answers it, so we'll see what he says and leave it at that. Okay, he answered and said to them, Why do you also transgress the commandment of God because of your tradition? For God commanded, saying, Honor your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me, is a gift to God. Then he need not honor his father or mother. Thus you have made the commandment of God of no effect by your tradition. Hypocrites! Well did Isaiah prophesy about you, saying, These people draw near to me with their mouth, and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. Okay, so there's that. So, he's calling them out. This was the answer, but anyway, now, this is so true of so many people, and this sums up very well the people that are in the religious camp. They follow the traditions of men, but their hearts are far from God. So, all right, now, when he had called the multitude to himself, he said to them, Hear and understand. Not what goes into the mouth defiles a man, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. Okay, so we're not talking physically anymore, we're talking spiritually here. Okay, so when you get to that kosher stuff, like, again, it's not a spiritual thing, it's not a salvation issue, it's just physical health kind of stuff. But when you talk about real defilement, spiritual defilement, it's what comes out is what he's saying here. So what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. All right, and there's a Bible verse, out of the heart the mouth speaks. So it's that kind of thing. Okay, then nowadays it's a different story. You have plenty of things that can go into a person and defile them, but it's because their heart is already defiled that they're even taking that in. Okay, so 12. Then his disciples came and said to him, Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? Okay, so yeah. And back to that thing, again, it's the heart that's sick. That's why they crave sin and they defile themselves. It's just they're already defiled, and that's why they do those things with, it's all defilement that way. But, I'm speaking of like vices right now, substance abuse and things like that. Okay, so this is funny. It's like, they were offended? Really? 13. But he answered and said, Every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Let them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind leads the blind, both will fall into a ditch. Okay, so why worry what they think, All right, they're blind anyway. 15. Then Peter answered and said to him, Explain this parable to us. So Jesus said, Are you also still without understanding? Do you not yet understand that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and is eliminated? But those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man. Okay, so again, it's spiritual, all right? It's not like, there's some bacteria on my hand and it doesn't matter. It's not that, okay? Okay, so, all right, 21. Then Jesus went out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed. But he answered her not a word. Okay, a lot of people, when they get to this, they're really thrown by this, like, oh, like that's so, uncaring or whatever. Well, I mean, he went around doing all these things. If he wasn't caring, he wouldn't have done all that. Okay, obviously, that's not the case. There's something specific going on here, and we'll find out some more. And it's not even because, she's not from Israel, but there's more going on here. And one major clue is the fact that her daughter is severely demon possessed. Now, there were other people demon possessed, and he cast out the demon, and that was that. But just, you kind of get the idea here that, she was probably into the occult heavily, and that's what happened. That's how the daughter also got demon possessed. And, that's a whole different bag, okay? And there are plenty of people out there like that who do these things, and they want to do these things, and they want to continue to do these things, and they have no intention at all to repent, none at all whatsoever. And then they might get demon possessed. And I've heard of stories where they'll go to exorcists, and the exorcist will say, okay, I'm willing to exorcise the demon out of you, but you have to, the person has to be willing to repent and not get involved in the occult anymore. And I don't know what other conditions there were, but at least that. And then they'd be willing to help the person. And if they didn't agree to that, they wouldn't, because it's like, then they'll cast it out and they'll go back to this, wallow in the same mud, get all dirty all over again, get demon possessed, and come back, 15 minutes later, wanting you to solve the same problem all over again. And that's like, no, you need to repent, and then you'll get the help, okay? And they don't, so they won't, and that's it. So there are a lot of cases like that. You have to be willing to leave this, or you don't get help from God. And I'm thinking it was something like this here, but it doesn't get into a lot of detail, but something. So, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, Send her away, for she cries out after us. But he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. So this was a term of, a dog was at the time in that culture looked down upon. It was an unclean thing. We can't imagine that today, I know. They practically worship dogs now, in this part of the world at least, but it was quite different over there. Not that they were mean to them, but it was just that they looked at them as more of a dirty animal, like a swine or something like that. So it's kind of like an unclean person in that kind of way is what this is saying. So there was something going on, okay? It's not that she was a Gentile and it was that. No. I mean, it was something that was happening that was making her unclean. And this can happen to anybody, Gentile or not, either way. So, all right, so there's more going on here under the surface. Okay, and she said, Yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. So he had mercy on her after all, and that's what happened. Okay, now, 29. Jesus departed from there, skirted the Sea of Galilee, and went up on the mountain and sat down there. Then great multitudes came to him, having with them the lame, blind, mute, maimed, and many others. And they laid them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. So the multitude marveled when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed made whole, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. Okay, now we get the 4,000. Now, Jesus called his disciples to himself and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. Then his disciples said to him, Where could we get enough bread in the wilderness to fill such a great multitude? That's what I was thinking of. I was like, didn't he just solve that problem a little while back? And they forgot already, I guess, but it's kind of funny. Okay, and then Jesus said to them, How many loaves do you have? Sort of a little hint, you know. I just find humor in these things. Okay, it's funny. All right, and they said, 7 and a few little fish. Bread and fish, yes. Okay, 35. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the fish and gave thanks. Okay, so there's that. Broke them and gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitude. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets full of the fragments that were left. Same thing again, see? Now those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. So here we see it's probably 8,000 or more then, you know. And he sent away the multitude, got into the boat, and came to the region of Magdala. Okay. Okay. So this just has a reference to another similar name here, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. It's close enough. So now 16. Okay. Now where are we? 27. Let's see. Okay, well, okay, I'll keep going. I might split 16 in parts. 16 verse 1. Then the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and testing him, asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, When it is evening, you say, It will be fair weather, for the sky is red, and in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. Okay, I mean, you know, he already did like a parade of signs already. I mean, I don't know what else they were looking for. But when they're just after that, then the answer is like, nope, now you're not going to get a sign. So there. Anyway, and this prophet Jonah is, you know, he was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale, and that's a type of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. So that's the sign they'll get. He rises again from the dead. I mean, you know, that's the biggest miracle ever. Okay, 5. Now, when his disciples had come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said to them, Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Okay, so he's starting another kind of lesson here. He's not, you know, really like it's just bread is just the example, okay, and the leaven, or it's just leaven here actually. Yeah, no bread is mentioned. So it's going to start another little lesson, a little object lesson. That's where he's going with this. Okay, so then 7, and they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. Okay, here you have to stop and laugh. It's like, well, let's see, he just fed the 5,000, which was really 10,000. A little later, he just fed the 4,000, which was more like 8,000. And that's where they're leaving from. And now we're worried because they didn't have enough bread. I mean, you gotta laugh. It is funny, but okay. But at the same time, yes, they did have something to start with. Like they had some little bits of bread and fish to work with and use, and that was developed into more. But he can create something out of nothing. Won't be the first time. But it's just funny. Okay. So now, in 8, but Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, O you of little faith, why do you reason among yourselves because you have brought no bread? Do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up? Nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many large baskets you took up? How is it you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread? But to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Okay. That's the object lesson. All right. It's just, you got to laugh. All right. 12. Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Okay, so there. All right, now Peter, this thing with Peter. Okay, 13. When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Okay, so here's a clue. 14. So they said, some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. So, like, they were thinking of, like, reincarnation, I guess, otherwise, because all these prophets were already passed away. Well, Elijah was taken up, but still. Okay. 15, he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered and said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus answered and said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he commanded his disciples that they should tell no one that he was Jesus the Christ. Okay, so now to backtrack on that, here, this is interesting. This flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And, I mean, by now it should be kind of obvious he's no ordinary man, right? But, Peter confesses, you are the Messiah, okay, the Son of God. And here it's like it's spiritually revealed or discerned, the way this comes as an answer. All right. And then I say to you, so here he gives him this blessing, okay? He names him Peter, and like Peter, the name, the meaning of the name had something with rock, okay? And I mean, that's okay, they all had names that symbolized something. So, and then this part, on this rock I will build my church. Peter was the first one, okay, of all the people at the beginning, right after the day of Pentecost. All right, the day of Pentecost came, Acts chapter 2, and the Holy Spirit descended on the church. They went out boldly that same day, and the crowds were there. You know the whole thing. I'm not going to repeat it all now, but Peter was the one who stood up and preached. Peter was the one who always got up and gave a sermon. It was through Peter that thousands of people got saved at the beginning. Okay, it was 3,000 and 5,000 and just thousands and thousands. And the church began to really grow. And Peter was the first one. So he was the one that was used at the beginning for this. And then it grew more and more. Later, Paul was used. Okay, all the apostles were used to grow the church. And that's just how it worked out. And many times the church is described, the kind of analogy with a temple, the pillars and the stones and that kind of thing. And it's all of us, and we all have a role, okay? But Peter was like part of that foundation stone thing, so he was used at the very beginning. The church really grew and sprang out from his preaching, okay? So that's, I'm sure, what this is referring to here. I will build my church, right? So Peter was used in a mighty way for that. Okay, that's it. And I'll get back to this. And the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Okay, so this means the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. The church, yes, we're persecuted, but the church will always exist and be triumphant and victorious, in the sense that the church will always be here till the very end. The gospel will always go out. Bibles will always be in existence. And that's just how it's going to be until the end. The devil is not even then able to extinguish that. So, and the more persecution that came, the more the church grew. So that's how that goes, Okay, so next. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Okay, so this is just more spiritual. It's not a literal set of keys, okay? It's just spiritual power. And, it goes through in that order. You have Jesus, you have the layers and foundations, the first 12 apostles, and then other apostles, and just others that go on down through church history that way, all the way down to us as the true church. So it's just the different layers of the church here. And we all have spiritual power. So, of course, the first ones had more authority, in the sense they were the beginning of the church. And, those beginning apostles and prophets, and their titles mentioned in different places in the Bible. So, mentions like teachers, prophets, evangelists. There's a list that mentions 5 items like that. But by the way, the term Pope wasn't mentioned on any of these lists, so there's no way anybody can get that from the Bible. There is no title anywhere about a pope in here, okay? That's totally made up, all right? There's bishop, and it's not that kind of bishop. It's just an overseer of the church, like a shepherd, a pastor type. That's it. Okay, there's no hierarchy like that. But they try to say Peter was the first pope. Well, you can't, because it's not in here. There's nothing in here you can base that on, that he was any kind of a pope. That, wasn't, he wasn't a pope, and there's nothing in here that says otherwise. And then, to go even further from that, they try to make a lineup of popes in succession, one after the other. Well, where is this line? It's nowhere. There is no lineup. There are no other popes either, and that's it. That's not biblical. There's no way to get that from here. Okay, this is not a basis for anything like that. And they twist everything anyway, so yeah. But it's not here, and that's it. And from the early church, you had the apostles, and you had all kinds of church like leaders at the time. There were others. If you read early church history, there were all kinds of types. There was a Clement, there was an Origen, there was a Polycarp, all kinds. I don't remember all the names, but I have read many books about early church leaders. So there were many. There wasn't one line, and this continues. The church doesn't grow in a line. The church grows out in all directions outward. There were leaders sprouting out in every direction, okay, and it wasn't a lineup, a succession in that way. It was leaders in the way Jesus set up leadership, not in the way the pagans and the world does this. So that stuff is totally off, okay? It's not here. So they can't claim it comes from here, because it does not. Okay, so I think I hammered that in well enough. Now I'll move on. Okay. Yeah, so I did that. Yeah, okay, 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised the third day. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. Okay, now, this, what it is Peter was famous for this. It was just kind of like the flesh would get the best of him. 1 minute the spirit takes over, and it's all just, really great. And then this will happen. So anyway, we all have to be careful of that. So that's the lesson here. And the same thing goes for persecution for us, okay? A lot of people don't understand that. Of course, this was a special case, but we follow in his footsteps in another way anyway. So, okay, there. Now, I'll cut this off here because I want to start a whole new video for this part. Okay, and we are at 43 minutes again. So, this just works. Okay, I'll be right back.